Hi guys, my name is Caleb. I'm the founder of Connect Roasters, and we are a business that roasts and sells coffee and proud to be partners with the Bridge Teen Center. We are here in Bourbonnais, Illinois in our facility where we roast coffee, and I just want to give you a quick kind of behind the scenes look at the process of what it looks like to roast coffee. So as you guys may know, coffee comes to us in these big burlap sacks. We buy coffee that's grown all over the world, Central America, the Caribbean, Africa, Asia. This bag in particular comes from the Dominican Republic. Most of these bags are either 132 pounds or 150 pounds of coffee. And so we store them here in our warehouse on pallets. And then when we're ready to roast the coffee, we open up the bag. You can see here that the burlap bag actually has a second bag inside. It's a plastic bag that the unroasted coffee comes in. And the purpose of the plastic bag is to keep it protected from the elements so that when it gets put on a boat and when it's being shipped, that it's not exposed to moisture or other types of things that could harm it. And if you want to come in, I can show you what the unroasted coffee looks like. In the coffee industry, we actually sometimes call this green coffee because of its color. It kind of has a greenish hue to it. Obviously that changes when we put it in the roasting machine, but it does have a bit of a greenish color. So if you hear somebody refer to green coffee, all they're really referring to is unroasted coffee. This is our beautiful roasting machine. It is manufactured by a company called Dietrich. They're out of Idaho, so this is US made. It is a roaster that will roast about 20 pounds at one time. So that's kind of an ideal batch size for us. What we do is we take the green coffee, we weigh it out in a bucket like this, and we roast about 20 pounds. Now, when the coffee comes out, we get a little bit less than 20 pounds. We get somewhere between 17 to 18 pounds. One of the reasons for that is there's moisture in the unroasted coffee, and when we put it in the roasting machine, some of that moisture is lost. So 20 pounds in yields about 17 to 18 pounds of coffee out. So the process is really relatively simple. This machine is actually pretty simple. I'll explain how the machine works and then the process that we use with it. So inside this machine is a drum that rotates. It heats up kind of like your oven at home, and it essentially cooks the coffee. And when we go through that process, it takes it from that green color to the brown roasted color that you're used to. So relatively simple machine, nothing too complex or complicated. Anything that goes wrong with the machine, any parts, probably available at Grainger or a place like that. So the machine is not really rocket science. We do have it hooked up to a computer, which is nice. There's a few data points that we can use and track and graph. There's a couple sensors inside the drum to measure the ambient temperature in the drum. And so anyway, we can keep track of that while we're roasting. And the guys who roast coffee, it's really helpful for them to have that real-time data. But basically what they do, once they weigh 20 pounds of coffee out in a bucket, they put it into this hopper here. The coffee sits in the hopper until they pull this lever, which releases it into the drum. Now, we have preheated this machine for about 45 minutes or an hour before we actually do that. So when the coffee drops from the hopper into the drum is already at about 400 degrees. Now, that coffee that we put into the drum is room temperature. It's not at 400 degrees. So what happens when the coffee goes from the hopper into the drum, the temperature in the drum drops very drastically from 400 degrees to 170, 175 degrees. Now, once the coffee goes in, the drum is rotating. You can see there's a little window here on this front plate. You can actually see the coffee turning when the machine is operating. And there's another window here. When it's fired up, you can actually see the infrared burner that is used to heat the drum. It's all gas powered, and so you can see the heating element in there. So after the coffee is dropped into the drum, slowly that temperature will rise from 170, and eventually when we get to the end of the roast, it's going to reach that 400 degree temperature again. So the coffee will rotate in the drum, depending on the coffee, between 10 to 12, maybe even 13 or 14 minutes if it's a dark roast. So it's in there for that amount of time. When the coffee is ready to be released from the roaster, when it's done roasting, it's a really simple process. The drum is rotating. The guys will pull this lever up. It opens the door here. That coffee will drop from the drum into this part of the machine, which is a cooling tray. This is an agitator that can be turned on, and essentially what this is a vacuum. You can see the holes in the grate here. The coffee drops into here, and the air is sucked out of this cooling tray. And the idea is that we want to cool the beans as quickly as possible. Take it from that 400 degree temperature down to room temperature as fast as we can. So the most efficient way to do that is in this cooling tray, which acts as a vacuum. After the beans have cooled, after they've rotated in here for a number of minutes, what the guys will do is they'll pull this here, and this opening will allow the agitator to push the beans out. We put it back in this same bucket that we used to measure the beans and pour them in. This will hold about 20 pounds, between 18 to 20 pounds of coffee. And let's say this is a day where we're roasting several batches. What we'll do is we'll transfer the coffee from a bucket like this to one of these big buckets on wheels. And so you can see we have some roasted coffee here. After the coffee has been roasted, what we do then is we package it up for shipment or for delivery. That process is relatively simple. We have a scale here that we'll use to weigh out the coffee. So if we're putting the coffee in a 12-ounce bag, for example, or a 5-pound bag, we can weigh that here and make sure we're putting the right amount of coffee in the bag. If it's whole bean coffee that we're delivering, then that's basically it. We measure the coffee in the bag, and then we take it here to the heat sealer. All of our bags have a foil lining in them, and I'm gonna get one to show you over here real quick. This is an example of one of our 12-ounce bags. And if you take a look in there, you can see how it's lined with foil. So the way that we seal these bags is with this heat sealer. Basically, it applies heat to this foil lining, and we'll seal the bag. So if we're selling whole bean coffee, that's the end of the process. Weigh it, seal it, and then it's ready to be packaged up and delivered. Now, if a customer orders coffee to be ground, we put it in the grinding machine here. This is an industrial grinder, a small one. It'll hold about 2 pounds of coffee, and coffee goes in the hopper here. We choose the grind size here with the selector on the front, turn it on, and we get ground coffee out of it. From there, the process is the same. The ground coffee goes into the bag, and then we bring it over here to seal it up for package and delivery. And the final product looks like this. So as you can see, process relatively simple. None of it is rocket science really, but there are some nuances to it. I suppose you could say it's one part art, one part science. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little look behind the scenes here at Connect Roasters. I hope you've learned maybe something about the coffee roasting process, and thanks for checking us out.